Stories with Griff, Dean Zesty Booch. You have to forgive me. Every time I say Booch, think of Dean Zesty Booch, and the guys out there just kind of laugh. The word Booch just cracks me up. I'm Stephen Shomler, craft beer storyteller. Welcome to the Culinary Treasure Network. Delighted you're here. I just posted episode 111 of the Portland Beer Podcast to the Portland Beer Podcast website. In that episode, I sat down with Griff, with Dean Zesty Booch. He's the head brewer there. Almost said broocher, I guess. I'm butchering the language. What does my son Zach say? He says English is hard. But there's a lot of really good stories in that episode, but there's two that I want to share with you right now. If you want to hear the whole podcast, you can go right to the website and listen to it there if you're not familiar with podcasts. If you are familiar with podcasts, you can subscribe to the Portland Beer Podcast, whether you go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts. But about this episode and the stories I wanted to share with you. Two things I should tell you about this episode. It's a little bit different. One, it's one of my on-the-road episodes. I've been blessed to go to Bozeman, Montana, 2020 being my third year in a row for Bozeman Craft Beer Week, and done a lot of podcasts and storytelling. And it's an incredible culinary and craft beer destination. If you want to see all of my Bozeman-centric content, just type into your browser. Don't search on Google, but type into your browser, www.adventuresinbozeman.com. I've got listings to all my content wherever it was. And then the other thing is, I never in a million years thought that I would be doing a hard kombucha episode of the Portland Beer Podcast. I mean, I love craft beer and I slip in cider once in a while, and even more rarely, maybe some mead. But I got to tell you, Dean Zesty is part of the Bozeman community. They're part of the Bozeman brewing community. All the brewers love Griff. They know him. They talk about him like you should know who he is. And everywhere you go in Bozeman, here in Portland, if you go into we have some amazing craft beer bars. You'll always find one or two, if you're lucky, 3 ciders on tap. You're lucky if you're a cider maker. So you have your craft beer and your cider. Everywhere you go in Bozeman, they've got Dean Zesty Booch on tap. They've got a hard kombucha seltzer now that they're doing, a sparkling seltzer that's hard kombucha, and their stuff is everywhere all over Bozeman. They're definitely part of the Bozeman craft beer community, as crazy as it sounds. So that's why we did it. Plus, it was a great story. I just loved getting to sit down with Griff and interview him. So there's a number I heard when I sat down with Griff that blew my mind. They had just finished their latest round of canning when we recorded this episode, and the story was just, I have to share it with you. So they have a do-it-yourself canning line, and the way they got it's kind of interesting. Organic Tonic, who makes kombucha, not hard kombucha, but kombucha right here in Portland, Oregon, they told the guys at Dean's, hey, this really cool guy, Nat West, Reverend Nat Cider, and I'm like hearing the story, yeah, I love Nat, he's amazing, that's great. Well, he has these designs and these plans for a do-it-yourself bottling line, and he'll get it to you. So they got a hold of Nat, and Nat surely gave it and shared it with them, this plans for a do-it-yourself bottling line. I think, well, we're pretty ingenious, and so they converted those plans into do-it-yourself canning line. So they built their own canning line. I'll put pictures of it up on the screen so you can see it. And they have a 4-head filler, an October seamer, a CO2 purge, and then they put this little system they built in the walk-in cooler, and then they do canning. I guess there's 2 numbers I need to tell you about. First, when they do their their canning, when they do their canning, it's 1 can at a time. That's right, 1 can at a time. And here's what blew my mind. Their latest round that they'd done just as we recorded this podcast, they had done 4,000 cans. That's 4,000 cans, 1 can at a time. I tell you, people in craft, they work hard to make it happen. They are ingenious. They do things like can 4,000 cans, 1 can at a time. So the second story I have for you that I want to share with you involves Hofbrauhaus. Now, Hofbrauhaus is this amazing dive bar in Bozeman, Montana. I was lucky enough to host an event there the first year I went out. Dive bar burgers and Bozeman IPA night there. It was such a fun event. I recorded an episode of the Portland Culinary Podcast with Dawn from the Hofbrauhaus. It was kind of like an amazing museum tour, because if you go in the Hofbrauhaus, there's stuff hanging everywhere. And we sat at the podcast. He just pointed things out and explained it and talked about it. And every single thing on the walls or hanging from the ceiling has a really wonderful story. And then I wrote an article for Culinary Treasure about the dive bar burgers there, because if you want a good dive bar burger, I don't know about you, but I love me dive bar breakfast, I love me dive bar burgers. They have a really good burger there. You go to Bozeman, you go to Hofbrauhaus. And Griff told me how Hofbrauhaus Dive Bar played an integral role. They're part of the secret origin of Dean Zesty Booch. So I got to tell you the story. So back in the day, Dean, there really is a Dean from Dean's Zesty Booch. Back in the day, Dean was a sound man in Bozeman, and he would do sound for bands coming into Bozeman and local bands. And there was a time in his life where there was a weekly open mic night at Hofbrauhaus. And Dean ran the sound, and he would bring his homemade kombucha to those open mic nights, and people would say, "Oh man, Dean, your kombucha is amazing. You should start a company. You should start a company." And he heard that so much at the Hofbrauhaus that he started Dean's Zesty Booch, which is incredible. And if you want, how did Griff end up there? Oh, I tell the story in the podcast. Go listen to it. It's pretty cool how Dean ended up there. But then the other fun story Dean told me about Hofbrauhaus, then the other fun story that Griff told me at Hofbrauhaus is that's the place where he met his amazing wife, Jody. He was at Hofbrauhaus one night. He met her. They started talking. They discovered they both have a love for the band Widespread Panic, and the rest was history. And he kind of made a funny comment. He says, I bet we're probably not the first marriage that started there. I bet a lot of marriages started at Hofbrauhaus. And then he was kind of thinking, he says, I bet a lot of marriages have ended there too. And I go, I bet you're right. I bet that place has been responsible for a lot of marriages and a lot of divorces. But I tell you, if you want to go hear the episode, check it out. A lot of great stories for Griff. I love me some Dean's Zesty Booch. Love me some Zesty. Their hard kombucha seltzer's incredible. Oh, and check this out. Why, yes, I am wearing my Zesty t-shirt. Anyways, thank you much for joining us on the Culinary Treasure Network. I'm Stephen Shomler.